When I came to, my head and my shoulder hurt, and I was cold. I remember feeling relief when I realized I was still in the church and not tied up in the back of a van. Everybody else was gone without a trace, except for the bomb. I approached it carefully, but quickly realized it was disabled, or had never been fully assembled in the first place. I knelt down to examine the explosives, looking for clues pointing me to their origin. If Young had been there, she could have run a full analysis. Lucky for me, the explosives were clearly identifiable from their shape and labeling alone. These were Cineon sticks, used in chamber blasting. Nobody had access to those outside of the mining industry. I stepped back, satisfied for a moment. Then the rest of reality came crashing down on me. What would Zora's boss do when he heard that I was here? What were they planning on doing with more? And fuck, what about the guard? I hadn't seen much through the window in the attic, but it had looked like one of Zora's guys had fired at him. My heart started racing while I quietly went back down the stairs. You may be asking yourself how I remained functional throughout all of this. How I didn't just collapse under the pressure and the looming prospect of losing my daughter forever. I think the truth is that over the years, I had gotten really good at tuning out the voice that always tormented me, that had always told me horrible shit. This was just adding to it. More to repress, more bubbling beneath the surface. Maybe if it had gone on for long enough, I would have imploded sooner or later. After I woke up, I stared at the ceiling for a while. I resisted the urge to look for news about a dead guard. Somebody had certainly found him by now. It was my fault for letting Zora's people go to the church. His death was on me. Fuck. I needed to do something about that. But later. Today would be a deciding day. Zora's words rang in my head. 7 o'clock tonight. I had to do what they asked of me, but I wasn't sure where the data they wanted was stored. I was running out of time. I sat up and made a decision. The sheet on the Liberators. I needed to complete it now. I had a feeling that all the puzzle pieces were there. If I found out who was in charge of the Liberators, I might finally understand what the data was all about and where to look for it. Or maybe I could force them to pay Zora's boss so he'd let Laura go. I was supposed to write a report on my findings in the Liberator's case, but I wasn't able to concentrate for even a second. First, I needed to wait for my colleagues to go home to be alone with Saito. He always worked late. But then what? What if he refused to help me? The idea of having to force him was devastating. He was my friend, after all. When I finally managed not to think about it anymore, a much more dire thought crept up on me. Laura might die tonight. And if she did, it would be my fault. inserted the stick into my cell and opened up the folder. My heart was pounding. For a moment, it looked like the data wouldn't load, but then the files started appearing on the screen. Dozens, maybe hundreds of documents, messages, pictures, and videos. They were decades old. Most of them dated 1799 or 1800. Their confidentiality level was one I'd never seen before. This was the type of data the Garian network would instantly pick up and trace, both to its receiver and back to its sender. It made sense to physically hand-deliver it if one wished to remain anonymous. I didn't know where to begin, so I opened up the very first file in the list, the oldest one, with shaking hands. It was a document sent from someone at the Department of Commerce to the director of the CDI at the time, Amelia Thorne, now Attorney General in charge of the Justice Department. My eyes widened as I skimmed over the paragraphs. When I was done reading the letter, I checked the time. 20 more minutes. I sat down and opened up the second one, then the third. As the conversation went on, a plan was hatched between a handful of politicians, special interest groups from the private sector, and high-ranking members of the CDI. I didn't recognize most of the names. Some might have been pseudonyms. I stopped looking at the files halfway through and let my head sink onto the backrest. Even though they had used very careful language at first, the goal and purpose of the operation were abundantly clear. The failure of Sector 2 hadn't been an accident. Garians had plotted and engineered it to gain sole access to Drovia's resources, and given its strategic importance at the time, ultimately retained supremacy over the solar system. My head was spinning while I tried to figure out what all of it meant for the present, and for me. I had long doubted the integrity of the CDI. Was it still rotten to the core, or had things changed? I didn't know about any ongoing operations that were breaching interplanetary law, but then most agents at the time of the Sector 2 incident hadn't known either, and some of the things I did know about, I didn't want to think about them too much. Now what? On the one hand, the public had a right to know. The culprits had to be found and brought to justice. Reparations had to be paid to the affected families and businesses. On the other hand, if the truth came out, the liberators would win. Savient extremists might be emboldened enough to take control of the colony and declare independence. If that happened, Gara would send its ships, and New Joran might send theirs to back up their Savient brethren, and to finally gain access to the planet's Telanium, of course, if their side won. Hundreds might die, thousands even. Time was running out. I tapped the contact of a journalist I had met a while back. I still hadn't made a decision when I heard the dial tone. The data would probably go through if I decided to send it, but there was no way in hell it wouldn't be traced back to me. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I almost didn't hear the voice on the other end. In the final corridor, we passed by a large surgery room. I didn't think about it at the time, but that must have been where they had given Zora her new face and implanted Boyd's fake ID. The only thing I could think about was whether they'd moved Laura or done something to her the moment they'd heard us coming. And that's it. The most tumultuous days of my life, and possibly in Garian history. We never did find out who was behind the Liberators. I had gotten so close, but ultimately we weren't able to present enough evidence to convict anyone. There was something we must have missed. Luckily, the Liberators never launched another attack or made another statement. They just vanished into thin air. One thing is for certain. Given the contents of the data the Liberators were after, they had to be a false flag operation aimed at escalating the situation between Gara and Drovia for whatever reason. A Garian extremist group hell-bent on exposing Gara's past crimes just doesn't make sense to me. And in fact, once the proof was out there, they vanished without a trace, like their only purpose had been fulfilled. The data I leaked sent a shockwave through the solar system. The source of the leak was quickly discovered, and the CDI not only fired me on the spot, but also tried to scrub me from their records and made all sorts of claims to discredit me. The Garian state scrambled to spin the narrative on the Sector 2 incident, but the data was authentic and unambiguous. 40 years ago, the Savient colony on Drovia had been sabotaged in a secret operation initiated by a handful of Gyara's top politicians, economic elites, and the CDI under the leadership of Amelia Thorne, now Attorney General and leader of the Garian Department of Justice. It became clear to me why she had tried to hide the data, fired the chief when he got too close, and ordered the arrest of Cox when she realized who he was. She is currently awaiting trial, along with a number of mostly retired politicians who were implicated in the conspiracy. Lara is free again and seems to be doing okay, but I wonder every day about the scars this experience has left behind. Even though I know I'm not directly to blame, I will never forgive myself for inadvertently dragging her into all this. As for me, I am free again, as free as I was before, but my life is forever changed. Catherine and I are dating again, however crazy that sounds. Things are so different now. The world is so different that maybe something good can come of it again. And finally, Zora. Easily the strangest person I've met in my life. Despite the terrible things she did, I'm grateful for her help when it really counted. It took the CDI a while to find out anything about her previous life. Turns out her name used to be Elizabeth Davis. She and her friend Boyd had been picked up by the mercenaries as teenagers on the run. Both of them came from affluent Garian families, and both had been reported missing, presumed dead. Zora will be brought before a judge this week, and I'll be there to make a statement. It might sound strange, but I hope she'll walk free again one day.